Hello, and welcome to Breast Cancer Conversations, a podcast brought to you by survivingbreastcancer.org. I am Laura Carfing, breast cancer survivor and founder of survivingbreastcancer.org, a nonprofit organization providing community, education, and resources to empower those diagnosed with breast cancer and their caregivers from day one and beyond. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Breast Cancer Conversations. I am so glad you are joining us today because this is one of a multi-part series that we are doing. I'm really excited because we reached out to you all, our community members, to say, hey, what would you like more information on? And overwhelmingly, people want to hear about personal experiences on various treatment plans. So today and over the next couple of episodes, we are going to be taking a deep dive into Verzenio, which is a therapy commonly prescribed for individuals with HR-positive, HER2-negative breast cancer. Today, I am joined with a dear friend who has been part of our survivingbreastcancer.org community, Deb, and she's going to share her experience on Verzenio. As we know, everyone's story is unique and different, and we're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, the positives, the things I wish I had known, what to watch out for, what works well, etc. So this is not to sugarcoat anything. This is telling you as it is. Deb was diagnosed with stage 2B breast cancer and prescribed Verzenio as part of her treatment plan. Her story highlights the importance of understanding symptoms, communicating with your healthcare team, and advocating for further evaluation when something doesn't feel right.
That night or the next night after getting that news, before I had a chance to talk to my oncologist or the surgeon, I ended up in the ER of our local hospital because I thought I was having a heart attack, but it was my first ever panic attack.
Welcome to the conversation. Debbie, I'm so excited that you're taking the time to speak with us today and share a little bit about your breast cancer experience. And we're going to dive into particular drugs in this particular conversation, the CDK4 inhibitor, 4/6 inhibitor, Verzenio, but also kind of understanding the side effects because everyone responds to breast cancer drugs in a very different way. And I think your experience that we'll get into really highlights the importance of treating the whole person versus kind of these silos that sometimes we find ourselves in when we're seeing one particular specialist or a primary care doctor or needing to go into the ER because something is exacerbated, et cetera. And really, you unfortunately having to be the recipient of uncoordinated care. So we definitely want to talk a little bit about your story, welcome you to Breast Cancer Conversations, and get your information out there so others can feel empowered and informed with information. So thanks for taking the time to share with us.
Well, I really welcome the opportunity. I love Surviving Breast Cancer, the organization, and all the information, the education, and I avail myself of the exercise program a lot and all your webinars. So it's been great. So when I saw this, I thought, well, here's a chance for me to give back, and if I can help somebody with my story, I'm certainly happy to do that.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're finding support through our variety of virtual online programs. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's great.
So tell us a little bit about your diagnosis.
Well, I have a major history of breast cancer in my family. My mom was actually a 32-year survivor, and unfortunately, 2 of my paternal aunts passed away from it. And I had an aunt with ovarian cancer, and my brother passed away of colon liver cancer during COVID. So I've been very vigilant for years and years and years about always doing my mammogram. But I was not good about breast self-exams. So in April of 22, I did my annual mammogram. It was always okay. And that fall, I went to a new gynecologist in October, and she did do a good breast exam on me. I remember it distinctly, and even went back and looked at my records, the clinical notes afterwards. Nothing was found. So that was the end of October of 22. Literally 2.5 months later, one morning I got out of the shower and was drying off and happened to walk over and look in the mirror and saw a huge indentation in my right breast. And so that was the shock first of seeing that change. I'm older. I'm 75. Older women are not used to doing probably breast self-exams like a lot of younger women are more aware of now. It truly was a shock whenever I saw that change to my breast. And I felt it. It was very big and it was very hard, even only after 2.5 months. So I immediately called my PCP. I got orders for a diagnostic mammogram. had it done, and I'll never forget that day. That was the first day the radiologist, I knew from the expression on her face that it wasn't good. And I was back 2 days later for a biopsy, and it did come back that it was, hold on a second, it was DCIS and invasive ductal carcinoma. I had a 3.5 centimeter tumor, grade 3, stage 2B, ER/PR positive, but HER2 negative. So I was very fortunate. I had an MRI though after that, and that's interesting because it did not show, but the pathology after my surgery showed it was already in a lymph node, even though the MRI did not show it. And I was very fortunate. I was able to have my surgery pretty quickly. And then I chose to have a single mastectomy. And then when the pathology came back, the shock was about the lymph node. In fact, that night or the next night after getting that news, before I had a chance to talk to my oncologist or the surgeon, I ended up in the ER of our local hospital because I thought I was having a heart attack. But it was my first ever panic attack because from the news, and I wasn't prepared for it. So then when the pathology came back, it also showed my oncotype was good enough. I did not have to do chemo, but my Ki-67 score was extremely high. It was 57%, which showed that it was a very fast growing tumor. So I was lucky to get it out as quickly as I did. But because of that, I was at very high risk for recurrence. So I needed to do the radiation. I did 20 treatments of radiation, which I wouldn't have had to do normally. And then they highly recommended that I do the Verzenio because of that Ki 57% score. So we were going away on a vacation, and I knew, and I was going to start it whenever we came back because I had heard about the side effects, about the diarrhea and everything, and we had this vacation plan. So when we got back, I had my mandatory, it was an hour and a half mandatory session with the pharmacist and the nurse practitioner going over everything. Part of that process was I truly questioned. They wanted me to start at the highest dose, which was the 150 milligrams. And I questioned, why do I have to start at the highest dose? And the pharmacist's answer was, well, if we start at the lower dose and you have a problem, we have nowhere else to go. But if we start at the higher dose and you have a problem, then we can go work our way down. So since then, though, I think I have kept up on it. I think they've changed that protocol. And because so many people like myself were having such adverse side effects and then having to immediately go off the drug, they have changed that protocol and now will start you. I don't know how that decision is made, but they're starting at lower and working their way up, which I truly feel that maybe if I had started that way, I might not have had the results that I did. But now it's in my chart. I can never have any kind of drug like this because I will share what happened then.
But let me stop you right there. So thank you
Sure.
very much for kind of sharing that rapid timeline of what sounds like just waking up one day and noticing this indentation. And
Right.
it seems like it comes out of nowhere. I hear this all the time. Your story is actually very similar to my story. I was in the sense that I was also diagnosed to be breast cancer, early stage, and also had lymph node involvement. What I want to highlight for our listeners is just, you and I, same stage, but very different protocols. So because my cancer also were in the lymph nodes, they recommended I have chemotherapy. I was not a candidate for the oncotype score. So it's very interesting that we kind of have these two different examples. And I know we talk all the time that every single cancer is unique and different, but I think this just highlights that. Similarly, I talk to a lot of women who opt either for a mastectomy or think because they're getting a mastectomy, they may not need radiation. And then in your case, I am hearing not only did you have the single mastectomy, but because of your high recurrence score, you were also advised and went through with getting radiation therapy as well. So I just wanted to highlight some of these nuances because, you and I could be like BFFs because we're both stage 2B, very similar lymph node involvement, but had very different outcomes in terms of treatment. You were prescribed Verzenio then because of your high risk recurrence.
Right. Right, because of that, and the one lymph node involvement too, I think. I met all the criteria at the time that they had for it.
So how long were you on Verzenio for?
Okay, so I started it when we got back from this vacation, and the immediate adverse side effects were just as you hear about, the diarrhea. The diarrhea was terrible, 3 or 4 times a day, no warning. I literally almost could not leave my house, and it was very difficult even making medical appointments around when you might have to be near a bathroom. And I became very dehydrated, and my kidney function got elevated, and I had low hemoglobin. So I had to have 5 hospital infusions for the dehydration. But every time I would get a weekly call from the nurse practitioner, they would mark normal, normal, normal. During the second month, I started to notice going up steps, shortness, just a little bit of shortness of breath. And I was a big walker. And because of where I live outside of Pittsburgh, a lot of hills. So I had to walk up a lot of hills. And I was starting to notice when I was doing that I was having more difficulty. So, and I reported that also, but nothing was done until I actually got in and saw the oncologist after month 2. And when I reported about the shortness of breath to her, she was very concerned. But she did not hear anything in my lungs. So, but she immediately wanted me to go over to the ER to have a CT scan because she was concerned about a pulmonary embolism. So, and it was Thanksgiving weekend. It was Wednesday. It was the day before Thanksgiving. But I went over to the ER and I did have a CT scan, and the results came back, and it was the same hospital. I want to make a note that, hold on a second. I forgot to mention too that that day I was in the ER when I found out I had the positive lymph node. They did a CT scan that day also on me, and my lungs were perfectly clear because it was like the week after surgery. There was nothing wrong with my lungs. Forgot to mention that because that becomes important about what happens next. So after the 2 months on the Verzenio, when they did the CT scan, it came back with great inflammation and multiple nodules in both breasts, not just the breast that I had, lungs, excuse me, both lungs, not just the one near where I had the radiation, because that's what they all want to blame it on, is on the radiation. So when it came back, but this is where they released me that day with an antibiotic saying it was inflammation. Nothing was addressed about the drugs I was taking, even though they had access to those records because it was the same. I mean, I was in the hospital right next door to where my oncologist was. They had access to that. But I think there was a total unawareness of the possibility of what the drug I was taking might have been doing to my lungs. All they did was send me home and say, well, you might have an infection and, take this antibiotic. So it's Thanksgiving weekend. I went home. I continued. Now, in the meantime, I I have stopped the Verzenio because of the diarrhea, waiting for the lower dose to get to me because the doctor had agreed to go to the 100 milligram, but I hadn't started it yet because this lung thing came up. But over the weekend, I didn't get to talk to the doctor until Monday about the results because of the weekend. But over the weekend, I literally went on and Googled, literally put in FDA alert Verzenio. And up came the 2019 FDA warning about the lung inflammation and death. And so I was shocked. Now, also, when I went over all the side effects with the pharmacist, I don't remember anybody really talking about shortness of breath or anything or about the seriousness of it. I think it is on the information. And then subsequently, I've noticed in all the advertising, it's now at the bottom of all the advertising. But I was totally unaware about that as being an adverse side effect. And obviously the ER was too, because they just sent me home with the antibiotic. So when I talked to the doctor that Monday, and she said, I saw your CT scan, okay, whatever, you can go ahead and start the lower dose of the 100 milligram. And that's when I shared with her, I said, well, doctor, over the weekend, I Googled FDA alert Verzenio, and this is what came up. And there literally was total silence on the other end of the phone. And she said, then don't take it again.
Oh, gosh.
Okay. Yeah. So that was probably the second shock during my journey, other than finding out you have breast cancer, the fact that your oncologist is not aware of the potential side effects of the drugs that you're being prescribed.
And to go from being secure with doing a lower dose to let's
Right,
pause and hold off entirely.
right. And the other thing about being discharged from the hospital, or even when I was in the ER, I never saw a pulmonologist. Nobody from pulmonology came to talk to me about what was going on with my lungs. And when I left there and then thought it was just an infection, and my oncologist never even said, you need to see a pulmonologist. On my own, I am the one that started calling to make an appointment. Nobody helped me with that. And that goes back to how you started at the beginning about we're in the medical system, everybody's in their own little silo and only looking at one thing. And I think that's what happened that day in the ER. Her orders said, look for pulmonary embolism. They rolled out pulmonary embolism. Okay, now you can go home. But they didn't look any farther as far as what else might be going on to causing all these nodules in my lungs and the inflammation.
And the shortness of breath
So,
that you're experiencing.
right, and the shortness of
So,
breath, right.
on one hand, like, "Oh, phew, okay, it's not the
It's
the"
not the PE,
but on the other hand, you're like, "Okay, well, then what is it? What else do we have to discover and find out?"
right, but nobody took it further. I, on my own, again, and it took 3 pulmonologists. The first one I saw, it was like 3 weeks later. I was lucky to get in to see one 3 weeks later. She said, "Well, yeah, sometimes chemo drugs can do this, so I'll give you a steroid." So she gave me a steroid, but it was 3 weeks too late. And then I saw another pulmonologist who agreed that he did not know anything about these drugs, and he was only gonna increase the steroid. He said that's what he would have done. And by the time I got to a third person, he knew what it was. He immediately said, was aware of it, had other cases with this, drug pneumonitis. But at that point, it was too late for me to be on a steroid. The damage was done. But he did do a bronchoscopy, which I had, and he took 10 biopsies. Of course, at that point, we were also concerned that I have metastasis because my lungs had been clear right after the surgery and what was going on. And everything came back perfectly clean. There was nothing wrong. It was definitely due to the drug. And because it was on both lungs too, it wasn't just the lung on the side. So it couldn't be radiation. Again, once they hear you have breast cancer and radiation, any change, they like to blame everything on radiation.
And during this whole time, you were not taking Verzenio anymore, you have stopped.
Oh, no. Once I had stopped after the 2 months, and I might add also, immediately after I stopped it, I never had diarrhea once again. It never happened again. It was unbelievable, and it felt so good, to tell you the truth.
Yes, of course.
That was pretty bad. So then I had pulmonary function tests, and I continue to have pulmonary function tests, because I do have limited lung capacity now, the way my pulmonologist says, I have like a straitjacket around my lung. I'm never going to be able to get a full breath because of what happened. I did pulmonary rehab then for 12 weeks, 3 times a week, did for 12 weeks, did pulmonary rehab to increase my lung capacity. And I did report my adverse side effects to the FDA. I never had heard anything from them. But I don't think the oncologists have to do that. I think only if there's a death. I've asked that around about that. It's like once the drug gets approved and marketed, you're on your own as far as finding out if there's anything else that goes wrong with it. Uh, so the other interesting part of my journey, my education journey with this too, is on Facebook one day I saw about an education group in New York that did a medical webinar, and it was about interstitial lung disease and breast cancer patient who were on these drugs. And I was shocked, but I ended up participating in it. I was the patient who was able to share my story. And it was an ER doc, it was a radiologist, and it was a medical oncologist. And they all said this is a very big concern, a very big issue. And particularly, I remember the radiologist really saying, we need to know what you're looking for. Be more specific about what you're looking for. And in my case, it was just look for the pulmonary embolism. But if there's something else going on, the more information we have, the better. And then the pharmacist wasn't called in either to take a look at any of the drugs, which is interesting because the pulmonologist, the third one that I finally got to, he said, if I had gone to the hospital, in the meantime, I changed my care to a different system. And the hospital that he was affiliated with, he said, the nurses there are aware of these drugs. They would have been more on top of what was going on. So it's a big lack of education piece, which is why I think this medical organization was doing this webinar. There's enough instance of this happening that to educate the medical community about what to look for and not just look for little things.
Exactly.
So
Especially on
anyway,
these harsh chemicals and drugs, we're always trying to weigh the pros and cons of, preventing recurrence, and do the adverse side effects outweigh the benefits of not having a recurrence. I know myself, was on tamoxifen for a number of years, and I remember the oncologist saying there is a slight risk of developing uterine cancer, but that risk, I think at the time, was 2 to 3%. So the benefit of being on this drug outweighed that risk, but you're still in the back of your head, like, aware of this. And so, and what you're describing, not even to be aware of what that risk was because it wasn't disclosed. So that's, yeah. Do you know what percentage of people are experiencing this type of lung scarring?
I don't know specifically. I have backup documentation from that presentation that I did with the webinar that I'd be glad to share with you.
Yeah, I'll take a look too, just to
Yeah.
see where we
Take
are.
a look. Obviously, it's enough that they felt that they needed to do this webinar to get that information out, because I think it was also serious impacting people stopping the drug altogether.
So,
And then in my case, I feel very, very, very vulnerable now. That was my one extra shot because of being at high risk for recurrence. Even though it was risky, I was willing to take that risk because I wanted that. I want to continue to live my long, full life. And so I was willing to take that risk. But then now, like I said, now it's in my chart that nobody will ever prescribe anything like that to me.
what does your survivorship plan look like now in terms of follow-up with either your pulmonologist or your oncologist?
Yeah, well, I see the pulmonologist once a year and do the pulmonary function tests. And so that's the other interesting thing, part of the journey as I was reviewing all this, getting ready to talk to you today. Because I was so sick at the beginning and because of all those side effects, I had such constant medical supervision, medical appointments. And then once I stopped taking that, and then all of a sudden, one day they say, you don't have to come back for 3 months. You're not ready for it. Nobody prepares you from that constant hand holding to you don't have to come back for 3 months. Well, I just got told the last time, and I don't have to come back for blood work for 6 months. So that was another thing. And right now, it's going to be coming up on 3 years for me. So I have the blood work and other follow-up appointments with my specialists. And, the other issue is tumor marker testing. So one of my tumor markers has been elevated somewhat consistently, not a huge amount, but I'm also now doing the Signatera test.
Oh, great.
So I've done that twice, and so far that's been negative. So that's good.
I want to take a quick moment and tell you something I'm really excited about. You can now download the survivingbreastcancer.org app directly from the App Store or Google Play. Just search for survivingbreastcancer.org. It is completely free to download, and inside you will have access to all of our support groups, educational programs and webinars, all of our blog content and articles, podcast episodes, and community features to connect with others who understand what you're going through. Everything in one place, because navigating breast cancer shouldn't require 15 open browser tabs. Download the app today. And did you have to advocate for the Signatera test, or was it recommended that you get it?
I asked for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate.
Excellent, as we all have to be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And because, because that's the other issue. A lot of oncologists don't even do the tumor marker testing. This particular one happens to do it. So then when it keeps coming back a little bit higher, I'm like, well, when do we get concerned? He's like, oh no, it's not high enough. Not concerned. Well, and this is the other interesting part. I did sit through the half-hour session with the genetic counselor through Signatera, and she is the one that said sometimes that particular number can be a little bit high due to ovarian cysts. And I do have some ovarian cysts. So, but I got that from the genetic counselor at Signatera, not from my oncologist. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm
So,
going through a series of tests myself that I'm sure I'll blog and talk about on the podcast at some point. But I feel like I'm at this point where if we do enough tests, you're eventually going to find something. So maybe we just stop testing for right now.
I know. I know. Like I said, you go from that intense hand holding and that intense looking at your calendar every day about which appointment and which test do I have to take
Exactly.
and how much do you share with people because I don't want people being concerned and all that sort of thing. But I also remember one of the things when I first got diagnosed too that was very helpful to me was I reconnected with a high school friend who is a 20-year survivor who actually has been on another drug for 10 years that they say she's a walking miracle because it was stage 4. But I remember her advice was, you have to stay on top of everything.
Yes. It's a full-time job, staying on
You
top
have to
of health.
stay on top of everything. Yes, yes, yes. And that's what I've had to do. That's what I've had to do. And I'm glad I'm in a position and am able to do that. I think about my mom who was 92 when she passed away. And I thought she had been going through this. There's no way she would have been able to, you know, uh, put all this together. Yeah.
You mentioned your love for walking. Are you still able to walk, get outdoors, get exercise despite having kind of these constraints with your breathing and your lungs? Are you still able
Yeah.
to find joy in that activity?
Yes. 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 In fact, exercise has been very, very important to me in my recovery, which is the one big positive change since having cancer because I was not an exerciser before. But it was actually through a great organization that I connected with in Pittsburgh, in addition to surviving breast cancer, that I don't even know how I found you. I know at the beginning I
I'm
was
glad you
just like
did so.
researching everywhere. And you came up and I found you, and it was so wonderful. But there was another local group in Pittsburgh called Cancer Bridges, and they do a big program promoting exercise because actually University of Pittsburgh Medical Center Moving Through Cancer is their big program because of the importance of it. Wish I had done it before the surgery, but anyway, so it is very important. I'm limited. I stop whenever I can't do something, but I can't become sedentary. In fact, that's what my PCP said. She said, you can't be sedentary. It would only because I actually have fibrosis in my lung, it would make it worse. You have to keep active. You have to. And it's absolutely been a big, big positive for me. In fact, yesterday, Laura, I mentioned your name too. I'm part of a study. That's the other thing. I've gotten very involved in some studies since all of this too. And one of them is through Colorado State. And so I think their exercise program.
Yes,
So I
we're
just
working
did,
with them.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Nice.
So I
Oh,
did this
good.
program and I might have found it out actually through your newsletter. And
Yes.
so
Oh, I'm
I'm
so glad
and yeah, yeah. And I'm going into the next phase of that study. And so they said they're recruiting for a new study. So I
we're
emailed them
about
and said,
to be promoting it, actually.
right. So I said, you've got to contact Surviving Breast Cancer. They have a weekly newsletter. Put it in there so people can get involved.
Oh, I'm so
And I
glad.
can't emphasize the exercise enough. And it's a good program, good support.
Yeah. And sometimes having that cohort model or accountability is really what you need to show up and kind of get motivated. So,
Oh, yeah,
absolutely.
it is because it's on the calendar. I'm one that I've had to put it on the calendar. I'm
Mhm.
not one that gets up in the morning and says, "When am I going to exercise today?"
Exactly.
That's why your schedule of classes, your restorative yoga with Kate, and I do Pilates. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Well, I'm so glad.
and you have to register, so you're to be part of it, so you know you've got to be
It's
there.
official.
So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so glad to hear that you're taking advantage of our virtual classes. I was just finishing our impact report. We had over 350 virtual classes in 2025. And yeah, I'm so glad that we can reach people because not every cancer center offers these types of programs, especially in survivorship. And so, I was just, when you were talking and, talking about, when you're told come back 3 months later or 6 months later, I'm working on a story right now about survivorship. And I write, survivorship is not passive recovery, it is active navigation. It's not the absence of disease, but it's the management of uncertainty. And so I really think that captures everyone's like, okay, you're in survivorship mode now. Goodbye. See you later. And we're like, oh gosh, no, this is when the train wreck is happening. And I need somebody to help me navigate this. So I appreciate you sharing your story and the ups and downs of everything that you've experienced. And despite the outcomes, really using this to educate others on side effects, symptom management, how to advocate for yourself. And as you were mentioning, getting 3 different opinions from pulmonologists about what is going on until you were able to get the answers and support that you needed, which I think is so important.
And the bottom line is you've got to listen to your body. And when it's something's telling you, like even first experiencing that shortness of breath, I thought, oh no, no. It's like, no, something's not right. And when something's not right, don't just let it go. You've got to pursue it and until you get some answers. And if you don't feel comfortable with the first one, but it takes a lot of energy, a lot of effort.
Oh my gosh. Totally does.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Well, thank you for taking the time and sharing your story with us. Is there anything else you'd like to leave our listeners with?
no, I think yeah, I'm kind of looking at my notes again. It's like going from the shock, and I know other people say this too about no map. Nobody gives you any direction about where to start and whatever. And that's probably been the biggest thing about this. And then when curveballs come your way about having to navigate and, keep asking those questions and don't stop until you get the answers. And use the resources of like wonderful organizations like yours and the one I use in Pittsburgh, Cancer Bridges, because there's a lot of other support groups and I don't know what I'd do without it. So I'm very grateful for what you do. And thanks for the opportunity, because if I can get somebody else to at least think about it, and then
And ask their
that's good.
doctors about it. See if it's a concern. And exactly
Right.
to your point, is the shortness of breath like normal or typical, or is this
Mhm.
something I need to like raise the alarms with and get monitored? So
Right.
that
Right.
education is really important. Yeah. And thank you everyone for listening to our show. I would like to acknowledge that all of the information on our podcast is from personal experiences and is not a substitute for professional medical advice. You should always contact your medical care team. If you are looking for specific topics or would like to be a guest on our show, please feel free to reach out. My email is laura@survivingbreastcancer.org. Our show is made possible by our nonprofit, survivingbreastcancer.org, and by our incredible donors like yourself. You can hop on over to survivingbreastcancer.org to sign up for our mailing list, make a donation, and explore the 400 plus programs we offer each year at survivingbreastcancer.org/events. Until next time, keep on thriving.